Greetings to the anointed. God doesn't conceal you because you're not worthy. You are a weapon, that's why. Sit with it now. You've been wondering why no one noticed you for years. Why you were consistently disregarded, undervalued, or even thrown away like leftovers from the gods. What if I told you this, though? You weren't invisible. They encrypted you. Your whole existence has been watched over by God, not to keep an eye on you, but to safeguard the things you are carrying. This is a crazy fact. Top secret activities are categorized by the US government according to how disruptive and harmful the information may be if it were made public too soon. For the sake of future protection, some records remain sealed for more than 75 years. Imagine what it will mean when God assigns you a classification. You're not running late. You're concealed. You're not in the rear. You're hiding somewhere. And that feeling of bewilderment you've struggled with, the pain of wondering why they don't notice me, it's not a bug. It's a tactic because, as the chosen one, you possess spiritual technology that, by just existing rightly, has the power to destroy generational strongholds, reveal demonic systems, and release prisoners. Here's the twist, however. They assume you're just silent, strange, or going through a stage. No, family. Today, we're revealing why heaven placed your actual identity on spiritual lockdown and why your abilities were never intended for the masses, the influential, or the inquisitive. You're a full heavenly USB drive in human form, strolling about Earth like, oops, did I just glitch your illusion? Hold on tight, for the secret is about to come out. And some people won't make it through the unveiling. First of all, in order to safeguard divine technology, God had to disguise you. You are more than simply an individual strolling through life like everyone else. You are a spiritually encrypted, highly secured, and divinely designed vault. You weren't hidden by God because you were insecure, weak, or unworthy. Because of what's inside of you, He concealed you. You are really divine technology in human form, with codes that, if unlocked too soon, might take down huge systems. People wouldn't have praised you if they had learned about your true self too soon. They would have made an effort to manipulate you. For their own benefit, they would have probed, prodded, dissected, and utilized you. Your experience of invisibility wasn't due to a lack of favor. The barrier was crucial. God was aware of the spiritual conflict that would break out the instant your actual character was revealed. Do you believe that people's hatred of you was unfounded? It wasn't a random act. That was your potential being detected by spiritual radar. The essence of you was never intended for casual use. You have a vision that breaks blueprints, disruptive truth, and unadulterated healing power. Heaven could not afford to expose such a power to the wrong people or put it in the wrong setting. You are thus untraceable by God. He intentionally allowed others to mislabel you. Some people believed you to be lazy. You were described as antisocial by others. Some people referred to you as strange. Excellent. The camouflage was that. Because they would have attempted to destroy your confidence or steal your calling if they had realized how dangerous you were spiritually. In actuality, God categorized you as a weapon. It's because you're designed to change reality, not to create damage. Additionally, the level of protection increases with categorization. Your journey didn't resemble anybody else's because of this. Your seasons of delay weren't punishment because of this. They were silently carried out heavenly procedures. You weren't concealed to be overlooked. You were concealed so that you might be released just when your impact would disturb the darkness the most. Second, your quiet served as a barrier against active hackers. You weren't weak by remaining silent. It was heavenly defense. It wasn't that you didn't have anything to say when you remained silent or held your tongue when they urged you to speak. It was because your soul was aware of something that your intellect was still catching up to. Not every listener is safe, and not every inquiry merits a response. People weren't just interested in you. They wanted to take something away from you. Every interaction, phony check-in, and unexpected interest in your tale served as a probe. In order to understand what made you unique, how you overcame what ought to have shattered you, and why your energy seemed so old and untouchable, they were searching for intelligence. That uneasy feeling you get when someone asks too many intimate questions or stares at you for too long. That was a threat flag raised by your internal system. Social anxiety wasn't the cause. The encryption was spiritual. Deep inside your soul are layers of your abilities. Furthermore, they don't react to inquisitive questions. They react in accordance with divine timing. You were never intended to give your soul to those who only want to examine you as a unique individual. You're not an undertaking. You are not an enigma. They were never supposed to decipher your code. Because your voice opens horizons, God kept you silent. Additionally, you would have given access to something precious if you had opened yourself too quickly to the wrong individuals. You possess information that has the power to change people's lives. You possess knowledge that, in the wrong hands, might have been misappropriated, stolen, or used against you. Heaven did not allow you to share too much because of this. It wasn't shyness that caused that spiritual hesitancy. It was a firewall. It prevented you from putting pearls in the jaws of snakes that didn't comprehend and just wanted to bite. You're not isolated. You're protected. You aren't emotionally aloof. You are protected spiritually. And the appropriate people will hear the codes in your voice when it's time. They were always supposed to get what others attempted to take, not because you made an effort to prove anything. Third, your shortcomings served as a cover to keep predators away. The breakdowns, lost chances, doors slammed in your face, and the times you felt like you were at your lowest were never signs that you were forgotten or cursed. They were heavenly decoys. God gave you permission to wear failure as a cloak to protect you rather than to punish you. He was aware that some people were observing you out of avarice rather than love. People were observing you in order to harvest you, not to help. They wanted to ride your wave before it had started, to seize hold of your anointing before it was completely formed. Heaven covered your brilliance with layers of turmoil, delay, and uncertainty. Although you were really being secured, it gave the impression that you were collapsing. Your losing seasons served as a smoke cover for your soul, because those who would have attempted to take advantage of you, imitate you, or undermine you couldn't connect with what they couldn't see. People assumed you were washed up, uninteresting, easy to ignore, and flawless. Your life serves as evidence that God has always operated in mystery. You weren't losing. What seemed to be lost was concealing you. Some folks left you believing they had escaped a bullet. Actually, they didn't get the blessing. People made fun of you because they believed your failures made you less of a person. However, it just increased the unpredictability of your return. You appeared like a failure so that only those with spiritual sight could recognize your worth, while heaven was silently, safely, and off the grid upgrading your software while others were laughing at your struggle. And you know what? Most were unable to. They believed your calling was over. They believed that your narrative would end in poverty, sadness, or rejection. However, you were never intended for onlookers to understand. You were not made to perform. You were made for a reason. To prevent them from ever considering stealing from you, God allowed them to mislabel you. Because marketing is unnecessary when your power is genuine. It must be safeguarded. And their failures were just that. A plan, a preparation, a shield. Heaven's method of keeping your actual strength hidden until the right time. You have been carrying weapons of mass liberation. Number 4. Your life has seemed like a never-ending struggle for a reason. Because you were carrying something that wasn't supposed to be peaceful, adorable, or cozy from the start. You possessed spiritual artillery from birth. Truths that disrupt generational falsehoods. Revelations that free mental prisons. And vibrations in your voice, presence, and energy that unconsciously disturb systems. A stage is not necessary for effectiveness. The vibe of a room changes just by being there. You haven't known this about yourself for as long as the opposition has. Because of this, even before you realized what you were carrying, your life was being attacked. The diversions weren't arbitrary. They were planned. Every poisonous relationship, pointless diversion, and phony buddy was a planned tactic to keep you occupied, perplexed, and depressed. Because you wouldn't just change if you ever tapped into what was really within of you. There would be a domino effect. People are awakened by the soul you possess. And too many individuals who walk in freedom and truth like you are too many for hell to handle. You were never hazardous because of your excessive talk or lack of action. You carry activation codes, which makes you hazardous. People start to doubt the falsehoods they were told and abandon you. They feel uneasy with you, not because you're unpleasant, but rather because something about you makes them realize how false they are. You are the mirror, even if you never seek to be it. Additionally, mirrors force individuals to make decisions, alter their behavior, or put on a false front. Behaving and fitting in are not your calling. The purpose is to free. Liberation, however, is battle. Hell sends diversions that seem to be lovers because of this. It attempted to deplete you as a result of betrayal, fatigue, or sadness. The opponent was aware that popularity would never translate into power. It would result from alignment. You embody the principles of mass emancipation. It's not ego, either. Design is that. Silence was never intended for you. You were created to challenge what other people accepted. And even now, while you are unaware of it, your sheer presence is freeing prisoners. Fifth, you were concealed to safeguard a time-sensitive objective. We didn't forget you. You were saved. And you were caught in what seemed like spiritual limbo while everyone else was hurrying on, becoming noticed, and receiving accolades. No acknowledgement, no explicit guidance, just delay and quiet. However, that quiet wasn't a sign of rejection. Something precious was being guarded by divine timing. The next version of you was never intended to arrive early, which is why your existence has always seemed like a waiting room. A certain hour, a certain season, and a certain change in the spiritual climate are all connected to the purpose you were born with. God kept you out of sight for that reason. Throughout your life, you have been surrounded by individuals who have seen you but never really understood you. Being totally unaware of what was subtly simmering underneath, they reacted with your exterior shell. They interpreted your composure as weakness, your seclusion as discomfort, and your modesty as inconsequential. That was the main idea, because they would have attempted to exploit you, break you, or manipulate the time of your release if they had realized who you really were and the weight of what was on your life. However, God does not let anybody to expedite what He has planned for its set time. Like a sealed scroll, you were kept safe until history needed what you had to provide. Doors didn't open when you pleaded because of this. You remained in places, careers, and social groups that were too limited because of this. You weren't trapped because of God. He was using something larger to sync your release. It's not just about you being unveiled. It's foretelling. The change is taking place at this time for a reason. There is an alignment in the spirit world, and the hidden, undervalued, and ignored side of you is poised to show itself. Not for notoriety or influence, but because the world at last arrived at the time your anointing was intended. You never denied anything by delaying. Sixth, you confounded the adversary because you didn't match their plan. God was saying, not yet. Too much depends on this being released at the right time, and that time is now. From day one, they sought to figure you out. They looked into your childhood, family history, and background in an effort to come up with a rational explanation for your depth, insight, and perseverance. They looked for personality characteristics to classify you, bloodline patterns to confine you, and trauma to define you, but they couldn't find anything. Since you didn't fit any of their established formulae, you perplexed them. Unlike other individuals, you did not ascend. They expected you to break, but you didn't. Every effort to put you in a predictable box was a complete failure. This is due to the fact that you were never included into the world's script. This isn't your typical assignment. The systems of men did not create your spiritual code. It originated at a higher plane. You did not build your identity in a hospital room. In God's presence, it was forged. Because of this, no analyst, psychologist, or instructor could possibly determine what makes you unique. Your power is not worldly. It is dimensional. You don't act based on facts. You work by revelation. And for that same reason, they were unable to stop you. They tried every strategy: betrayal, loneliness, confusion, and gaslighting. To tear you down, they hurled everything at you. However, the visible wasn't where your strength was kept. It was hidden in the invisible. They were unaware that they were assaulting a ship that was carrying technology that was not appropriate for their realm. You're encrypted spiritually. Since your directives don't originate from this dimension, they are unable to foresee your movements. You don't just stroll by. You move according to your task. You would change course even when they believed they had you figured out. You would revive just when they thought you were finished. And they were shaken by your constant ascent, regardless of how many times they attempted to curse you, cancel you, or restrict you. Because individuals need approval to survive in their environment. But obedience is the key to power in your world. They looked for grandeur in your body, but they never found it. They are not authorized to have that degree of access, and you were created in the spirit. They dread you for that reason, but they don't know why. They made a great effort to shatter what they couldn't even comprehend because of this. Seventh, God concealed you in settings that miscalculated your abilities. Not by mistake, but by divine design. You were positioned in situations where others misinterpreted you on a regular basis. Being surrounded by people who dismissed your intuition, made fun of your aspirations, or considered your individuality as a weakness wasn't simply bad luck. That location was carefully selected. God didn't let you grow up around narcissists and skeptics to hurt you. Rather, He did it to conceal you. If you had been exposed to the wrong kind of appreciation too soon, your mission would have been revealed before it was shielded, and your talents are precious. You were never supposed to be valued by these individuals. Actually, they can't view you as a part of the strategy, because they would have attempted to sell you, turn you into something lucrative, or utilize your talent for their own purposes if the wrong people had recognized your value. God would not let such to occur. As a result, you believed something was wrong with you when He let you be put in rooms where no one applauded, where your voice was disregarded, and where your grandeur sat quietly in the background while mediocrity took center stage. However, there was nothing. It was divine decree that you were invisible. Your defense has been underestimation. They would have attempted to control you with charm and feigned love if they had understood how much power you had. They would have held you captive to their standards and imprisoned you in their conception of success. Because you were hazardous and too dangerous to be put in the limelight until you were spiritually mature enough to prevent your purpose from being stolen, God surrounded you with mockers, not because you were weak. That quiet served as a spiritual noise canceller to prevent you from hearing falsehoods passed off as praise, and the rejection you experienced served as a firewall. You weren't forgotten. Before your calling was recognized by the environment, you were concealed in plain sight, disguised by poor judgment. The disclosure will be irrefutable when the time comes. But up until that point, you were protected by their ignorance. Their lack of vision kept your mission intact, and their disdain served as your cover. Your delays were heavenly cloaking devices. Number 8. Not all of the delays you encountered were detours. It was a divine plan. You believed that you were being punished for not advancing quickly enough, falling behind, or losing out on chances. You weren't late, however. They were cloaking you. God was rerouting you via spiritual tunnels that the adversary couldn't discover, protecting you from exposure. You were being silently escorted through back doors that needed spiritual clearance, while others were running to platforms and fame. What seemed to be closed doors were really locked vaults that prevented unauthorized access to your fate. You would have found yourself in situations where your mission would have been compromised or taken over if you had chosen to follow the easy routes or give in to temptation. Every trap set for the previous iteration of you was seen by God. He could see how success would have drawn opportunists, manipulators, and counterfeiters who had no business being associated with your vocation. He thus led you along the unseen road rather than the obvious one. Because of this, your tale was unique from others. People were unable to connect to your procedure because of this. You weren't just being put to the test. They were transporting you. Transported via secret timelines that were inaccessible to the adversary. You survived things that should have killed you because of this. You maintained your sanity in the face of everything around you collapsing because of this. Because you never ventured out into the open. You had heavenly protection while you were walking. Your moment was not lost. You were shielded from criminals who would have attempted to imitate, duplicate, or undermine your life. The current iteration of you is not late. It goes unnoticed. Additionally, no fake version of you could emerge in your place since you remained in the process. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to reproduce what they were unable to perceive. Your delay served as a shield, a cloak, or a manner of heavenly stealth. The world will soon see what has been growing in quiet, shielded from all the traps that would have destroyed it before it ever started, now that God is lifting it. 9. Your real identity would have sparked an unwarranted conflict. There would have been anarchy in the natural and spiritual worlds if people had seen your full brilliance too soon. You had no power, therefore you weren't concealed. You carried too much of it, and that's why you were concealed. The sort of power that, just by being there, exposes deceit, upends demonic institutions, and breaks generational shackles. God was aware that disclosing your actual nature before you were ready would lead to an untimely conflict and assaults for which you were not yet prepared. Hell keeps an eye out for danger. It doesn't spend energy on harmless individuals. However, someone like you was born with a calling connected to divine justice, disruptive authority, and keen insight. Hell doesn't overlook that individual. That person is a hell mark. The assaults on your life were thus surgical. The conflict was personal because of this. The whole revelation of your identity was always intended to occur on heaven's timescale, not yours. So even in that case, God only let the adversary see pieces of who you were becoming, never the entire thing. You could have been frustrated, wondering why you were always being delayed, why your voice sounded muffled, and why your talents weren't being acknowledged. Delays weren't denial, however. They were the result of heavenly preparation. God was constructing your spiritual armor, your perseverance, and your clarity. Because applause cannot ignite what you are supposed to bear. It must be based on unwavering obedience. You may have been crushed by your own strength if your light had been unleashed without the depth to contain it. You would have encountered resistance more quickly than you could have tolerated it. God did not grant you early permission for this reason. He prepared you with seasoning. Before you were seen, you had to be rendered immobile. That was the purpose of the procedure. Protection, not punishment. Not rejection, but preparedness. You are now entering the time for which your light was saved. Avoid being too early or too late. Exactly on schedule. You're prepared for the conflict this time. You'll discover who you are. Your humiliation was a wonderful mute button, number 10. It stung every time you were made to feel tiny, laughed at, or discarded. It was more than simply you becoming harmed. However, something more profound was taking place. The cacophony that could have destroyed your launch ego was being muffled by heaven. You have a serious calling from birth. The fact is that pride may have interfered if your talents had been acknowledged and celebrated too quickly. Furthermore, pride ruins what God creates in addition to corrupting it. So you were protected by humiliation. Their rejection of you was a calculated move meant to bring you into harmony rather than shatter you. Because there won't be any validation where you're heading, you weren't meant to be driven by it. You had to learn how to stand by yourself, how to be forgotten without becoming someone you're not, and how to serve without complaining. Punishment wasn't what that was. It was a prelude to actual power. God couldn't allow you to become one of those talented individuals who collapsed due to conceit and a sense of entitlement. He thus permitted your early humility. Those who humiliated you believed they were winning. They assumed you would swell up, give up, and vanish. They were utilized to maintain your soul clean, but they were unaware of it. Avoid becoming conceited, performance-dependent, or overconfident. Real strength doesn't cry out to be seen. Therefore, God let your public humiliation cleanse your inner stance. It makes an impression and moves silently. You weren't degraded because you weren't valuable. Because God forbade you from basing your identity on praise, you were degraded. A foundation like that would have crumbled under strain. However, you will be so grounded by the time you ascend that your objective will not be distorted by any amount of acclaim or influence. You were never weak because of your humility. Calibration was the cause. Heaven ensured that your heart could bear the burden of your vocation without breaking. Now that you've passed the test, your voice will shake atmospheres rather than merely echo. Since you simply need alignment to move, permission is not required. 11. You have a secret trigger and are a walking prophesy. You've always known that you were capable of more. Something strong, something unfinished, something unexplored. It was like a faint burning under your skin, following you everywhere like a silent anguish. You were unable to both flee and explain it. You didn't have a weakness when you felt that something was missing. You included it in your design. God did not give you the full map, but He did make you a living prophesy. Because the opponent would have designed every strike to kill it before it had a chance to breathe if you had given it everything too soon. You're prophetic in every way. Your suffering wasn't arbitrary. It was a sign. Delays weren't denial on your part. They were signals. Even at the darkest parts of your journey, heavenly fingerprints have been left behind. But the truth is that God concealed the trigger, which is why you were unable to really understand who you were becoming. From you, not from the world. Because until you were properly damaged, purified, and aligned, even you couldn't be trusted with the entire extent of your mission. You could have attempted to force it if you had discovered it too soon. You would have constructed an amazing but unsteady structure. God instead gave you the ability to move about with a secret fire. He allowed you to struggle, question, and even have doubts, to strengthen you so that you wouldn't crumble under the weight of your actual task, not to weaken you. The loudest individuals in the kingdom are not the most dangerous. Until God flicks the switch, they are the ones who are unaware of their own power. Heaven has encrypted the body in which you have been dwelling. It was a locked blueprint, yet it was genuine. You were never damaged. You were kept, sealed, and waiting. And now the alarm is going off in paradise. The moment has arrived. Everything is in line. The people, the position, and the pressure. Furthermore, the secret trigger won't just alter your life when it activates. Everything that was awaiting your compliance, your breakthrough, or your emergence will be activated. You are more than only a prophesy. The fulfillment in motion is you. 12. Your everyday existence was a covert operation. Your life hasn't been random at all. Not even the most unpleasant, tedious, or exasperating sections. You felt trapped at that work. You felt invisible because of the dynamics of your family. It felt like nothing was happening during those years of obscurity. They weren't squandered. They provided cover. You were being strategically positioned while you believed you were only surviving. God wasn't only keeping you hidden. He was placing you in situations that required a quiet disturber. You were put in uninteresting routines, strict systems, and poisonous homes. Not because you were meant to stay there forever, but rather because those places weren't ready for your whole truth. Your cover would have been revealed and assaults would have started before your task had started if your anointing had manifested in full force too soon. Thus, God allowed you to fit in. He gave the impression that you were simply another silent child, an unnoticed adult, or a worker who came and went. On the inside, however, he was creating something hazardous, dangerous in a freeing manner, not in a violent sense. The people sitting next to you were completely unaware of who they were. They believed that there would be no repercussions if they mistreated, ignored, or manipulated you. However, they were unaware that heaven was observing, taking notes, and documenting everything when they interacted with a heavenly agent on a time-sensitive mission. You weren't put in these situations to settle in. In order to survive the same systems you were created to expose, you were brought in to decode, observe, and discover spiritual patterns. Heaven was infusing your soul with tenacity, knowledge, and discernment while you persevered through what seemed like pointless repetition. For your next level, you were collecting intelligence. The mission is changing now. The mask is beginning to come off. Because your everyday existence was never just focused on survival. People are starting to realize that you're not who they once believed you to be. Spiritual espionage was what it was. And you're going to be exposed now that the task has reached a mature stage. You were put into your surroundings on purpose, not as a victim of them. 13. The danger they are unable to recognize is you. And the issue is that people are used to dealing with textbook geniuses, noisy rebels, high achievers, and predictable classifications. They are able to identify certain kinds, control them, and even mimic them. However, none of those categories apply to you. And that's why they see you as a problem. You move in a unique way. You have a different way of thinking. Although you don't aim for attention, the environment changes when you talk. You don't try to get in. But wherever you go, doors open or inexplicably close. Charm, isn't it? Charm, isn't it? It's heavenly intelligence. And you are dangerous because of it. Because you were too sensitive, you weren't concealed. They attempted to put that untruth onto you. Too quiet, too passionate, too sensitive. Actually, you were concealed because spiritual ecosystems are upset by your mere existence. You don't even need to take any action. People's motives, delusions, and long-suppressed emotions are revealed just by being around for a long enough period of time. People get uncomfortable as soon as you enter a room. Not because you're impolite, but because they begin to remove their masks without your consent. What scares them is that you weren't made to follow the script. Credentials are not something you worship. You don't rely on acceptance. You follow directions that they are unable to follow. They so keep a suspicious eye on you while attempting to determine your perspective. However, there isn't an angle. The message is you. And since you bring the type of truth that cannot be branded, controlled, or explained away, it disturbs the systems that rely on image and control. You weren't pushed to the front early on because of this. God was aware that there would be no turning back once you were made public. No phony system could be at ease in your presence. Your genuineness would be too strong for any phony relationship to endure. Your existence could not be tolerated in any lifeless environment. They didn't send you to blend in. You were sent to face the invisible. And everything that isn't true is going to be revealed now that you're coming out of hiding. You're walking in alignment, not because you're trying. The true danger is that light isn't all you carry. The interruption is you. 14. Your speech activates your abilities on purpose, not in response to praise. Your talents were never intended to be shown for the sole purpose of impressing others. You were unmoved by flattery because of this. You were never lured by trends, and you were never really aroused by attention. You continued to feel as if something inside of you was still waiting, locked, unexplored, and dormant, while others sought platforms, recognition, and recognition. You pondered if there was a problem with you for a long time. Why didn't you have the same desire to prove yourself as the others? Why couldn't you just show up like everyone else does so effortlessly? As your design was unique from the beginning. You have power dependent on assignments. Simply because someone is looking at you doesn't mean that you activate. When heaven gives you instructions, you activate. Voice activation activates your presence, not crowd noise. The holy frequency sets them off. Certain tactical situations that need your strength. That's why you felt empty in certain situations. Forcible visibility seemed phony because of this. Because vanity cannot overcome your abilities. They react to a purpose. By now, you've most likely noticed it. How you come to life when something important, spiritually connected, or authentic is occurring. You let things out that you didn't even practice. People change, clarity grows, and wisdom flows. However, it shuts down if you attempt to simulate the same energy in a shallow environment. That isn't inconsistency or laziness. It's part of spiritual procedure. There are limits to your anointing. One of them is that neither spectacle nor ego can control it. Your purpose was not to perform. Your purpose was to unlock gates. You are not a puppet. You are a gateway. And that's precisely why you perplex those who are used to predictable answers. They believe they can entice you with prestige, coerce you with attention, or charm you into taking action. But because you don't move to get praise, none of it works. To align, you move. And everything inside you activates with horrifying precision when the true call reaches your spirit. Your quiet has been misinterpreted because of this. People have questioned your drive because of this. However, they will eventually comprehend. Because you won't need an introduction when the time comes. Simply being who you were meant to be will open up the environment. Don't you see it now? You were never forgotten, never ignored, and never chosen at random. You were purposefully concealed because you were carrying something that heaven couldn't afford to let fall into the wrong hands. Not because you were weak. God concealed your genius under layers of obscurity, shame, rejection, and delay, sealed your identity, and encrypted your path. To protect you, not to shatter you. Every setting that miscalculated you, every individual who attempted to categorize you, and every door that was closed and left you perplexed were all components of a higher intellect. The world was never supposed to understand you. You were put under classification. You were selected for a task that required a degree of defense that hell couldn't match. The encryption is currently being removed. Unlocking the secret codes is underway. And with divine accuracy, the version of you that they could never have imagined is coming to light. You're not just strolling into a goal. You are the active realization of a prophecy. You're not getting up for attention, praise, or retribution. Because the task requires it, you're ascending. Pain isn't stopping you from going. You're following directions. And kingdoms change when you arrive. Never were you a misfit. You were a disguised spiritual weapon. The disguise is also no longer required. Allow them to gaze. Allow them to inquire. Give them a panic. Because God concealed the one they believed to be buried in order to reveal a new realm. Greetings from your reveal. Heaven knows precisely who it sent, but the earth won't know what struck it. Don't keep this message to yourself if it seems like the affirmation you've been waiting for. Distribute it. Somebody else has been enduring quiet, conflict, and delay while believing they were overlooked. Their awakening could be your share. If you feel seen, please like this video. Tell me which section most resonated with you by leaving a comment. I read each and every one. To ensure you don't miss another amazing download, subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell. Additionally, if you have already subscribed, thank you for joining this increasingly strong group of selected individuals who are shamelessly rising together. It's more than simply a channel. It's a movement. Additionally, your presence, voice, and support are important. One truth at a time, let's shake up the environment. May you be blessed.